What's going on, everybody? I've been gone for a little while. I hope everybody had a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. 2020, here we are. Today I want to share the diagnostic process that I went through on a particular vehicle. This was a 2010 Lincoln MKT. This is the vehicle that's based on a Flex from what I hear. Structurally, it's like a Flex, but the body panels are all different, but I think electronically it might be like a Flex too. I'm not 100% sure about that, didn't dive into it much. Before we get started, I want to real quick go over why I'm doing this. I've been, for the past year, getting a chance to work with a lot of technicians, newer technicians and also well-seasoned technicians. And sometimes what I'm seeing is people are having trouble developing a plan of attack. It is so important that we understand how a system works. And once we understand how a system works, we can develop a plan of how we're going to diagnose it. We should be able to confidently look at a wiring diagram and at any point of that circuit be able to determine what the voltage should be. And if it's not the voltage that we expect, we should know where we're going to go to check for the faults. So I'm just going to take you guys along with this. This was a very interesting one. I practice what I preach. I try to put these testing procedures into place for anything I do. I want to learn how the system works so I get a grasp of how I should be diagnosing it. Even just as recently as a week ago, I was having my tail kicked by a C5500 truck. Multiple problems on that. And guys, it's the graciousness of YouTube and Facebook and these Facebook groups that we can bounce ideas off each other. People help out. It's a wonderful thing. If you're not a part of the Diagnostic Network, be sure to check that out. But on to this Lincoln MKT. So the complaint with this vehicle was no crank, and no crank, which is a no start, of course, and we could not get the shifter to move. Pressing the brake pedal, the shifter would not come out of park. Someone had popped the shift linkage off the gear shifter so they could manually put it into neutral so they could push it around. This vehicle appears like it has been around the block, if you know what I mean. So getting there, the dash was mostly, the driver's side of the dash was mostly tore apart. There was a lot of stuff apart on this vehicle, so we had to take a look. But I don't care what we're working on, guys. We have the technology. Whether you have a snap-on tool, an Autel, or a launch, you can go ahead and do a complete vehicle DTC scan. And that's where I always start with. You never know. Sometimes you'll see a code in another module that kind of leads you in the right direction for your diagnostic path. So here we are scanning the codes. I'm using IDS because I do have it. If you can afford the factory tools, that's great. But I'm telling you, you would get the same results with a Autel or a launch. So we had a brake switch circuit failure, opener shorted in the ABS control module. That was really the only code that I saw that gave me any diagnostic direction on this vehicle. So looking at my brake shift interlock as the main point of concern, I wanted to figure out what makes this thing tick. We know that there's a couple fuses in this particular diagram, pointed out here. And here, there is a field effect transistor that controls the brake shift interlock. And that's from the smart junction box. The smart junction box houses that. And going further, here's the ground. Taking a look at the brake switch, it is powered up by that one fuse. When the brake switch is depressed or closed, it powers up that violet and white wire. That violet and white wire also goes back to the PCM as a brake on-off switch input. So we've got the scan tool already plugged in from doing our all DTC check. The next logical thing from my point of view is to actually go into PCM, select the data. With the IDS you can do this. Other tools just give you it all, which is nice, but if they give a data PID for battery positive voltage, I always like to take a look at that too. Sometimes you'll see something you didn't see. And here we are. I'm looking at the brake on-off switch, or Ford calls it the boo switch, and we have a signal. So I'm pushing the brake on and off, and it's changing state. So at this point, I'm pretty confident. I'm happy that this fuse is good, the brake switch is good, this circuit is good up until this battery junction box. That's the underhood junction box or fuse box. And I also know that this circuit is good down here to the PCM. So just by doing that simple thing, I eliminated a large part of this circuit for faults. Knowing that we have battery positive all the way here up to this point, the next stop through the battery junction box is a smart junction box. Okay, so this is inside the vehicle, this is outside the vehicle. I wanted to determine if the smart junction box was getting the signal it should. So using the scan tool, we go into the data list and we are looking for the brake on off switch in the gem or smart junction box, and it's staying off at all times. So looking at our diagram at this point, I want to verify that we have the input voltage to the gem or smart junction box. This is connector C2280B, terminal number 40, a yellow and green wire. So looking at the diagram, I did a quick component location. I know it's at the smart junction box. I was trying to get a view to determine where that connector was. And to be honest with you, it's not, I wouldn't say it's a walk in the park. It's not that hard, but it's not super easy. And that's why a lot of guys don't test or they don't get into stuff. I find that they just don't want to take the time to learn how to locate components. So I knew the area of this connector. Going to the smart junction box, I pulled the wrong connector, and I'm looking for this yellow and green wire at terminal 40, and I was on the wrong connector. So I plugged it back in, did a little more research, and I found the wire that we needed. We were looking for terminal number 40, and here's a pinout view, and we can see this. I always like to, when I'm looking at pinout views and trying to locate a connector on a vehicle, I always like to look for that terminal's neighbor or the next closest wire to make sure that the colors match. That's how I usually verify that I'm in the right connector. I try to use back probing if I can. On this one, the connectors are too small, and the flip side is we're inside the vehicle. The back side of these terminals are exposed. It's tucked up. There should be no moisture or salt or anything getting on it. At this point, terminal 40, in depressing the brake pedal, we did not have any voltage. We were showing very low voltage. I think it was like 30 millivolts. So on this diagram, looking at the next thing, we know we got our power going up to the battery junction box. So at this point, we know that we have the brake on-off signal at least to the splice of the violet and white at the battery junction box, and no signal at the yellow and green at the smart junction box. The problem is somewhere in between. So the next easiest place to test is the battery junction box at the relay. Testing at the relay is much easier than trying to pull up a fuse block and test underneath it. So I went and got my little relay tester. This is the one I use here. During the testing, I installed this into the battery junction box, and I put our relay into it and depressed the brake pedal, and terminal 4 was hot, but I did not have any juice coming out on terminal 3. We had no voltage on terminal 3. And finding out how this system works, well, this is a 5-terminal relay, and we had a 4-terminal relay in it. So somebody along their diagnostics had swapped relays. We replaced that relay with a proper part relay, and went back into the smart junction box, looked at the boost switch on and off input, and it was there. It was switching, so that was good. Now we can move our shifter out of park. We still had a no start situation, and that was something I've never seen in my life. The starter relay, somebody had apparently either bent it on purpose or had to hold all the relays out and shoved it in sideways. They bent one of the terminals at a 90-degree flush. I mean, it was bent 90 degrees to the case of the relay box and then back up. This diagnosis really wasn't a hard or too involved for me. It did take me a little bit of time, but nothing crazy. But it's been around the block, and a lot of people had their hands into it. So I just want to show how taking a strategic approach at how the system is supposed to work, developing a plan, and testing can lead us into the right direction of our diagnosis. So guys, I just want to bring you along for my thought process. I am always all ears to how you would have done it. Let me know. It's interesting to hear different strategies and ways. Being Monday quarterback is fun. If you have not made a video on your diagnostics, do it, and you'll be looking at stuff in a totally different way. I guarantee you, it's really fun for me to play Monday quarterback on myself. The one thing I can tell you I would have done different is, instead of trying to test for voltage at this pin 40 of C2280, I would have should have just went to the relay box and tested. That would have been super easy if I tested at the battery junction box. I was just kind of hung up, won't lie, a little bit on a brain trip because this thing was kind of gutted and I was expecting a problem underneath the dash. But really it was maybe an 8 or 10 minute detour. You know, it happens, but we got down to the root cause of the symptom. My question always is, what was the original problem with the vehicle? Why did this thing get gutted and torn apart? Maybe somebody hung a starter on it already, and that was one of the main things that was wrong with it, but somebody else flipped relays all around, making more problems. So I love the human-induced error. That's what we deal with. You guys take it easy. I appreciate you watching. If you have questions, comments, or concerns, please leave them below. If you want hands-on training brought to your shop, give us a shout. Take it easy, guys.